Hi y'all, my name is Lauren. I am a PhD chemist, and today I wanted to get on here and talk about the things that I did not buy for my makeup haul in February for my birthday. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I am on a no buy 2026. So what that means for me is that I had a certain limit that I could use both in cash and gift cards for my birthday month, which was February. And so I had a video that went up recently about those purchases that I made and what came into my collection, but I wanted to go ahead and follow that up with a video about the things that were on my list but did not make it into that haul. Ultimately, I wanted to make sure that this year for No Buy 2026, I'm learning to go from impulse shopping to intentional purpose in my purchases. So that is why I'm trying to do these types of videos as well, because if you saw recently in my palette inventory as well as my makeup inventory, it's now starting to kick in that I do have far more than what I could ever need. So moving forward, I want to make sure that things I bring in are only intentional purposes and not made via boredom or impulse. Just to recap, in case you did not see my birthday haul video, the few things that I did bring in were the Lisa Eldridge Betty palette. I also brought in a Chanel powder that is the Sun-Kissed Glow bronzer, highlight, and blush all in one. Brought that in light coral. I also got a Cloud Paint blush from Glossier in the shade Float, as well as a Rhode Pocket Blush in Toasted Teddy. And the final item that I brought in was the Angel's Share on the Rocks from Kilian Travel Size perfume. So all of these things either filled a gap in my inventory, like the Chanel powder, I didn't have any 3-in-1s, or the blush from Rhode was more of a one and done bronzer situation, or they had been sitting on a wish list and things that I had thought about for a long period of time. So one thing that I have come to learn is having these guidelines and boundaries made it easier for me to say no to quite a few other things that I was looking at purchasing. So now we can go into what those other things are. The two things that I brought up in my birthday haul video that I did not end up purchasing were the Glossier Cloud Paint blush in Storm. So that one in particular, I went in store, and when I swatched it, I realized that I would not be able to utilize it to its full potential. So it was a little dark on my skin tone and not something that I'd be able to use in my everyday makeup. And so I went with Float instead, which was just a better color for me, which just shows that it's important to go in store and swatch if at all possible. And then the other one was the Violette FR Matte Lip Whip in Mon Cherie, and even though I do really like that one and it was very pretty whenever I swatched it in store, I have far too many lip products at the moment, and it didn't fill a gap, and it just made me overwhelmed to think that I would be bringing another lip into my collection. So I didn't end up going with that one either. Next on the list of temptations to buy was the area of luxury temptations. So this came with the new release of the Gucci Glow Blush. And so that one had beautiful packaging, looked very aesthetic, but when I was actually listening and watching some of the reviews, I realized that it wasn't exactly going to fill a need that I use. And that is because it seems to not have a ton of base pigment in the lighter colors, and it seemed to have more of a glow than what I look for on a day-to-day basis. So after watching some reviews and taking a break, it seemed like it was more of a meh product that wouldn't really fit in my collection. The next high-end purchase that I was looking at doing was the concealer category. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole between the new Prada concealer and the new Chanel concealer, which if you've been keeping up with, the Chanel concealer has been kind of a bit of a hassle to get a hold of here in the US, but it did finally release. And so I did the same thing. I went and watched some reviews. I looked at it and I saw that the Prada concealer is a little bit thicker, less of a serum-like concealer, whereas the Chanel is that serum-like lightweight consistency that I tend to prefer. So what I am going to do is put the Chanel concealer on a wish list to get later in the year whenever I cull down some of my concealer category, if and only if I can find a shade that matches me well. So that'll be something that I need to go swatch in store. The final in this category was the new Armani Luminous Silk Foundation. And so that one, if you're not aware, just got re-released due to the regulations in the EU needing it to be reformulated. And whenever I was going to look at it, the shade range was just far too confusing for me to understand. And I'm not willing to pay that type of price for something that isn't clear and that I haven't swatched and been able to tell works for my skin tone, so therefore that one just kind of went off the list pretty quickly. Two luxury items that have also sat on my wish list for a very long time are the Dior Contour Stick, as well as the Gucci Sun-Kissed Bronzer. So for the Dior Contour Stick, I'm currently using the Westman Atelier Contour Stick in Biscuit. So this is in my project pan for 2026. And I will probably take the entirety of the year just to use this mini version of the shade Biscuit. And so my rationale was that I didn't need to go out and buy the Dior Contour Stick when I already had something that worked in that category. So I'm going to leave Dior as a backup for whenever I do run out of that contour stick. And for the Gucci Sun-Kissed Bronzer, I've heard many a reviewer say that for a pale skin tone, it has a fabulous red undertone that works very well. It is something, like I said, that has been on my list for a fairly long time and something that I've been keeping my eye on. There have been rumors of a reformulation due to Gucci being bought out by someone else. I'm not 100% sure if that is correct or not, but due to that, and then also the fact that it is something that has been sitting on my list for quite a while, I do think it is something that I probably will try to pick up at the next Sephora VIB sale if it is available, because it's also sold out quite frequently. So if it is available, I can use one of the gift cards that I still have remaining for the next Sephora VIB sale and get a bit of a discount because it is a very expensive product. The next thing on my list of products that I did not buy is eyeshadows. So if you've seen recently in my eyeshadow inventory, I own quite a few. It is an area that I tend to collect quite frequently in, and so eyeshadows is where I like to play on my makeup day-to-day basis. So some of the few that have come out recently that I was looking at purchasing was the Nomad Paris La Boheme palette. And so that one just has a really, really pretty color story. Hopefully I will be putting it up on the screen over here and you can see, but it's really nice. I really like Nomad's quality, but one thing I have found is they tend to have a sale on Black Friday where the more you spend, the greater percentage you get off. And so that one in particular is going on my wish list to be purchased during my Black Friday. The next for eyeshadow is the Glaminatrix Grounded palette. So I immediately liked it upon seeing the release, and then I kind of sat with it much longer, let it linger, and realized that with 170 palettes and all of what I do own, what I do not need is another neutral palette. So that one has been removed from the list, and it also did help. I would have purchased it immediately when it came out, but that was when the US was undergoing all of the shifts and changes with the tariffs. Glaminatrix had a distribution center in the US that they were starting up, and so whenever I went there to see if I could purchase it, they only had the Tones of Turd palette available, which is the same palette as the Grounded palette, just the April Fool's version, and that's not really my cup of tea, so I was hoping to wait until the Grounded palette came back. But once I was sitting back and thinking about it more and more, I realized that neutral palette is not necessarily what I need in my collection at this time. So to follow that, there were a couple new releases recently that I was very interested in. So Byredo came out with their Vesuvio palette. Upon looking at it and seeing it with a few of the creator reviews, I realized that it is not one with a color story that I would use frequently. It's far too pink and magenta, and on my skin tone and with my eye color, that tends to look more bruisey than it does good. So that one quickly came onto my wish list and went off again, as well as the Victoria Beckham Orchid palette. So I did purchase the Lisa Eldridge Betty palette for my birthday, and I was going back and forth between that one and the Orchid palette from Victoria Beckham. I don't have any eyeshadow palettes from either brand at the moment, so I wasn't really thinking too much formula wise, as both have been praised overall for their formulas, more for the color stories. So again, the Victoria Beckham tend to pull more magenta than purple. It just wasn't exactly what I was looking for with a purple palette, whereas the tones in the Betty palette from Lisa Eldridge more met what I was looking for in that type of palette. So therefore I went with that one. And the Victoria Beckham is also good to note that it is in their permanent collection. So if I ever do determine down the road that I want it, I can pick it up at a later date. It has no urgency for that one. The final palette that was released recently is the Nomad Cruise collection that they came out with. And if you've been seeing anything about those, it is a palette that has all mattes and also a different palette that has all shimmers, as well as 2 companion highlighters that have multi-tones in them. And so I just knew for myself personally, I'm not an all matte or an all shimmer palette user. I have a few of them, such as my Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 6. And I very rarely pull out all shimmer palettes. I tend to want to just make my life easier by pulling out one in the morning that has both matte and shimmers and using that to create a cohesive story rather than to have to dip into like multiple palettes and multiple things. Same with why I don't use a lot of my Adept Cosmetics palettes, because they are so shimmer heavy that I find I'm just not drawn to them as much as I am with a palette that has even mattes and shimmers. And I do know for the new Nomad collection, they are magnetic. So you could technically mix and match your palettes around and make one that, you know, 2 now that have both mattes and shimmers if you get both of them. My problem with that is, as I mentioned earlier, I have 170 palettes and I know some of them, a percentage, are magnetic. I know my Natasha Denona are magnetic. I know one of my Blend Bunny is magnetic. And quite a few of my other palettes that I own are magnetic palettes, and I have never once felt the urge to mix and match them. So that's just not something that I personally do. So that one came out, and while it was being sneak peeked, I got very excited because, as I've mentioned before, Nomad is a priority brand for me. It is one that I tend to collect pretty much everything that they come out with. But as I'm being able to sit back and kind of take a step and backwards and sit with things, I'm realizing that not every color story is for me, not every palette is meant for me. And so this is a collection that I do think I will ultimately skip, including the highlighters. The one that's meant for light tones is very pretty, but I have a ton of highlighters in similar colors, and the other one is meant for dark tones, dark skin tones, so not meant for me overall. Finally, the last category that I want to talk about is skincare. So as you'll see if you watch my Q1 declutters, empties, and that video that's coming up at the end of March, I tend to go through skincare far more quickly than I go through makeup, as I'm sure everyone does. But because of that, I tend to be on a more like stock up mentality. Whenever I see sales, I tend to just buy backups for everything that I have. And what I realized this year is, as I've been sitting back and not purchasing things, I've witnessed multiple sales come by. So both from Skin Medica and from Medicate, 2 brands that I do like to purchase from quite often, they've had multiple sales since the end of Black Friday, and each one seems to be similar, if not a little bit better than the last one. So using a sale as a reason to buy backups and stock ups is not really beneficial, especially because with the amount of skincare that I currently have, some of it might actually be able to go off for the actives before I can actually get to the new one, because skincare has a lot shorter shelf life, even with it not being open, just because those active ingredients do need to be as potent as possible to be used in their desired outcomes on your skin. So buying backups for skincare is not something that I have felt the need to do this year, which is great. And it has also allowed me to shift the budget that I would have been using to buy all that skincare into doing the facial that I did in February. And I might actually continue on with that, because that is something that I can see as more of a long-term investment in my skin health, and something that'll be more advantageous in the long run. So in closing, I just wanted to say that it has been kind of surprising for me to see how many products went from being a want to a wait whenever I kind of slowed down and thought about it. So again, some of the things that I utilized were being able to swatch in store to see whether the color would work for me, or if there was a shade that matched my complexion. Being able to see reviews from people who are doing it to see whether or not it would make sense in my makeup collection and how I use my makeup. And then also just sitting back and doing the inventories that I have done recently. So both my palette inventory and my makeup inventory, to see what gaps I have left to fill, what is actually in my inventory that I haven't touched recently, and being able to do things like Project Pan and Shop My Stash and all of these other projects that currently exist on YouTube and can be utilized to more use what you have rather than create new purchases. So going down that pathway has made me realize that there are actually quite a few things that I'm okay waiting on. And I think that's mostly what I want to get out of this next No Buy 2026 year. Is I'm not planning on it being perfect. As you've seen, I've already brought things into my collection, not through anything that wasn't talked about in my exceptions for my no buy rules for 2026, but things are still slowly coming into my collection. But I want them to be more intentional purchases rather than just impulse purchases. Finally, I would love to just leave you with a question, which is, I'd love to know what recently is something that you wanted to buy but you didn't, and so therefore you're very proud of yourself for, because we should all be celebrating those types of small wins. If you're interested in mindful makeup content, conscientious consumerism, Project Pan, Shop My Stash, things that can help you use what you've already owned, I would love to have you along for the journey. That is my theme for the year of 2026, and I would love to have you here. So please subscribe. Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.